Afghanistan, portrayed on screen. The face of a country beyond the cliché. The films produced here reflect the country's social conflicts. The focus is usually on women. They have shaped Afghan cinema over the past 20 years. As female stars in dramas, as directors, and as producers of award-winning films. But since the Taliban reclaimed power in August 2021, everything has changed.
We will create cinema that takes into account Islamic values, national traditions, and Afghan culture.
The radical Islamic Taliban has deprived women of their basic human rights, and films are becoming tools for propaganda. Is this the end of Afghan cinema?
We filmmakers, we are now in exile.
Through these movies, we can change the mind of the people to think different.
A self-assured movie culture had established itself in Afghanistan, with women as major contributors. Roya, Sadat, Sahraa, Karimi. We profile two of the country's most prominent female filmmakers who have been fighting for Afghan cinema for many years. We explain how Afghan cinema developed into a serious film culture. We'll show how female filmmakers managed to save themselves from the Taliban. Since early on, they've had to learn how to fight back. We'll see how they support and protect each other. And how Afghan cinema lives on in exile. To understand how Afghanistan's strong, female-driven film scene developed, we go back to 1989. Soviet troops leave Afghanistan after 10 years of occupation. A bloody civil war begins. 4 years later, the Taliban takes over. Their regime oppresses women and bans any form of art. In response to the September 11, 2001 attacks, the US and its allies push back against the Taliban. But the Islamist extremists remain, still controlling rural parts of the country. Shooting films in Afghanistan during this time, especially outside of the cities, is dangerous. But Roya Sadat from Herat dares to do it anyway. She taught herself the basics of filmmaking through reading and learned the rest directly on set. Her films tell the stories of Afghan women, like Roya, a police officer from Kabul. She wants to help a woman who has been sentenced to death by village elders for adultery. In doing so, she herself comes into conflict with the powerful tribal leaders.
از قریه خودم از منطقه خودم دور پزن بیابون ساختم ما اگه او اعدام نشه ما باید خود اعدام کنیم.
The film shows how freedom and the rule of law are undone by tribal traditions and an extremely conservative interpretation of Islam. This especially affects women who break with convention, like Sadat herself, for whom cinema is everything.
Making filmmaking not like a kind of work for me. It's a whole my life.
She made her first film after Afghanistan was liberated from the Taliban in 2001. In her early 20s, she became one of the country's first female directors, a role model for many young Afghan women and a pioneer of Afghan cinema. Together with her sister Alka, a documentary filmmaker, and her husband, a film lecturer at Kabul University, she founded her own production company, the Roya Film House. She's produced more than 30 documentaries, films and television shows, showing the injustices in the lives of Afghan women and their strength and courage. In her latest work, she profiles 4 women's rights activists.
And they will fight for their rights, and I will be one of them. This has to be one united country with all of us, all women, all men.
The women of Afghanistan always in the headline of the news everywhere. They're just only victims, and also they're in the position that always the men and political men that give this decision for them. Through these movies, for sure we can change even in the mind of the people to think different about that.
In 2013, to make these films accessible to Afghanistan's female audience, Sadat created the Arts International Women's Film Festival. It became a meeting point for the country's female filmmakers, including director Sahraa Karimi. Karimi was born in Tehran and has only lived in Afghanistan since 2012. Her family fled from Afghanistan to Iran before she was born.
All my life I was a refugee somehow. Refugee in Iran, refugee in Slovakia, and I didn't have this feeling of being in home very much with me, this experience. My return to Afghanistan gave me a very unique feeling of being in home.
Karimi studied at the Film Academy in Bratislava, where she earned her doctorate, but she wants to shoot and tell her stories right here in Kabul.
I wanted to be a storyteller of my own people, especially women of Afghanistan. I wanted to see in first hand what is going on inside my country.
3 women are at the centre of her latest film. The women are strangers, but they share a common destiny. Privileged or not, all 3 of them bristle at the patriarchal structures in their country. This is a look into the daily lives of millions of Afghan women. Karimi travelled throughout the country for 2 years collecting stories. Private donations financed the shoot, and an Iranian production company eventually covered the rest of the production costs. But she doesn't just want to tell stories. She also wants to promote cinema in Afghanistan. In 2019, she won the bid to become president of the state film organisation Afghan Film, becoming the first woman to head the institution. Afghan Film supports new productions and houses the country's entire film archive, at least what's left of it. Afghan cinema is once again suffering from the Taliban's oppression. He is the new president of Afghan Film, installed by the Taliban.
The films that have been produced in the past 2 decades have been contrary to Islamic tradition.
From the beginning, Afghan cinema has been shaped by regime changes in the country, but has survived even the greatest of upheavals. The country's first cinema opened in Kabul in 1934. One of the first Afghan film production tells the story of a young villager with soft images. In the 1960s, cinema in Afghanistan, at least in the cities, experienced an upswing. The state film organisation was founded and several movie theatres were built. The first colour films made their debut in the 1980s. At that time, Afghanistan was under Soviet occupation. Cinema was encouraged but also controlled and censored. A lot of money was invested, making elaborate films like Epic of Love possible. With the first Taliban rule came a dark era. Many films were destroyed and cinema was banned. But after the Islamists were ousted in 2001, a new era began. Movie theatres reopened, filmmakers could pursue their passions. Low-budget productions in Bollywood style enjoyed great popularity. They were shot in small film studios like this one in Jalalabad in the northeast of the country. Afghan filmmakers like Sadat have taken the international cinema scene by storm. His feature film Osama won several awards. And there are plenty of women. Besides Roya Sadat and Sahraa Karimi, for example, Sharbanu Sadat or Mariam Ghani. They all want to tell their country's stories and gain international recognition at film festivals. The Taliban's return to power marks another difficult time. The emerging cultural scene and its main players are in danger. On August 15, 2021, the Taliban recaptured the capital, Kabul. Islamists had been advancing from province to province since NATO forces began withdrawing. Hundreds of thousands of people desperately tried to flee. These were days of fear for Sahraa Karimi as well. Stay or go? What are the remaining escape routes? Vital decisions had to be made in a very short time.
I knew that my life will be in danger if I stay, and if I live alone, so my family will be in danger. So I decided to leave. I left everything behind. My home, my apartment, my work, my dreams, everything.
2 days after the fall of Kabul, her family managed to escape. Roya Sadat is currently in the United States. She follows the news of her homeland from afar.
Suddenly I see that the Taliban captured the Herat city, and after 2 days they capture all the Kabul and other cities. It was unbelievable, like you just watch it very terrible and horrible movies.
She was only going to stay for a few weeks to prepare a directorial work for the Seattle Opera. There she will stage 1,000 Splendid Suns, based on the best-selling novel by Afghan writer Khalid Hosseini. Washington has become her home in exile.
It's a very hard moment for us. My generation, like me, we start from zero, and we work very hard during these 20 years. We not only use the equipment, we lose our land, our country. There is a people died. There is a people they don't have, even they don't have food.
Her colleague Sahraa Karimi ended up in Rome after fleeing Afghanistan. She received a guest professorship at a state film school.
I'm very grateful that I have this opportunity to share my experience as an Afghan filmmaker with the students. That helped me to heal my wounds, my pains.
What will happen next in the lives of the women who stayed in Afghanistan? Until gender segregation can be guaranteed everywhere, many will not be able to go to work.
A concept is being prepared. This matter will be resolved as soon as possible.
Decrees appear targeting women. Female Afghans can only study if they have no contact with men. Secondary girls' schools are closed. Women are no longer allowed to drive alone for long distances and no longer travel by plane without the company of their husbands. The decree that women must cover at least their heads and faces in public sparks protests across the country. But even so, more and more women are disappearing from public spaces. Almost all Afghan women share the experience that men determine what goes on in their own lives.
Being a woman in such a traditional and patriarchal society, and especially an independent woman, it is not easy. It was one of the biggest struggles that I had.
Under the Taliban, she risked her life. Now she wants to support those who have not yet managed to escape. She makes a call to Kabul.
What is the situation? Do women go outside or not at all? How are they being treated?
Unfortunately, I no longer have any optimism at all.
Asita Fadous is an artist and former director of the legendary Ariana in Kabul, the second oldest cinema in the country.
Once my brother and I left home to get something important. My brother was driving, and I was in the back of the car. Then the Taliban stopped us and questioned my brother. They asked who he was taking with him. He said, "This is my sister." But the Taliban replied, "How do I know if that is your sister or someone else?" Not even a brother and sister have the right to go out or buy anything without being bothered. A woman has no right to have a job, so she has to stay close to home. She has to do the cooking and housework there, nothing else.
Sahraa promises to help Asita flee Afghanistan. They plan to stay in touch. Roya Sadat can relate to Asita's experiences of living under the Taliban. She often encountered resistance in her family as well.
It was very hard for my father to understand what I'm doing, and my uncle, for a long time, he don't come to our home because when I go for shooting.
The courage to make films against all odds was depicted in this documentary from 2008, shot by Spanish director Alba Sotora. It tells how Roya Sadat explores and breaks through the narrow limits of patriarchal society.
به زمان طالبان هم به ولایت هرات زندگی میکردیم، همراه فامیل خود زندگی میکنم و میحالم خاطره چندان خوش و خاطره که برای من خوشایند باشد دوران کودکی و نوجوانی خانه‌دارم. حتی رفتن ما به مکتب خیلی مشکلات بود. بعد از اون که خب زمان طالبان بود، به زمان طالبان ما به جو خیلی بسته و محدودی زندگی میکردیم. صرف من
Roya Sadat and Alba Sotora have since been closely connected privately and professionally. Today, Sotora is the co-producer of Sadat's new film, A Forgotten History. Filming on location in Afghanistan had to be cancelled, but giving up is out of the question.
Tajikistan is a country that is suitable for the kind of shooting we want to do, because we also have the option to shoot in a studio in Barcelona.
Right now, the crew also, they're in different country. The characters, the female actress, the actor, they're in different location, different country. And the situation is also not clear that they can travel or not. This is a hard part of the pre-production for this movie.
People are fighting to keep Afghan cinema alive from abroad. But what about in Afghanistan itself? The Taliban claim it treats the country's film history with respect. They say there will be no destruction of film or bans on pictures this time around.
The archive of Afghan film is very important and has historical significance. It's completely secured in the presidential palace. No one has access there who could damage it.
It sounds hopeful, but the fact is all film productions around the country have been cancelled and cinemas are closed. A November 2021 decree prohibits the television screening of films and series featuring women or any content that contradicts Sharia law. only propaganda videos are produced now. Even though most Afghan directors have now left the country, their strongest works of the past 2 decades remain. Afghan cinema lives on abroad, as seen here at the Duhok International Film Festival in the autonomous region of Kurdistan. It's a refuge for Kurds who are subject to oppression and censorship in many countries. Cinema plays a special role here. As a sign of solidarity, the festival dedicates a separate section to Afghan cinema. Sahraa Karimi is also showing her latest film here.
Cinema is somehow our weapon to fight against brutalities.
The programme also includes award-winning Kurdish productions, such as the opening film, a deep insight into Iraqi society, marked by patriarchal structures and corruption. The president of the international jury is one of the most important directors in Afghan film history.
Our cinema undoubtedly reflects all events that we experience. It mirrors our lives. That's why Afghan cinema, as well as Kurdish cinema, tells about the deep pain of the population throughout history.
His most successful film, Barmak, recounts the dramatic years during the Taliban's first reign of terror in the late 1990s. He used amateur actors. Women were not allowed to work or leave the house alone at this time. Those without male family members risked starvation. A single mother has no choice but to disguise her daughter as a boy. Osama becomes her new name. But when she's forced to attend religious classes, her disguise is discovered. The Sharia court decides her fate. In 2004, Sadat Barmak received a Golden Globe for this film, among other awards. He's convinced that the creativity of Afghan directors is a result of the difficult production conditions that they face in his country.
Most of our filmmakers, especially the young filmmakers, don't have producers. So they try to find various other ways of turning their ideas and concepts for cinema into reality. Each one of these filmmakers are internationally recognized, but have been forced to live and work far away from their homeland. Unfortunately, this is a common fate for many Afghan directors, including Mariam Ghani, the daughter of former Afghan President Ashraf Ghani. She lives in the US. Her films deal with the lesser-known chapters of Afghanistan's history. Her best-known work is about 5 unfinished films made during communist rule in Afghanistan, films that stand somewhere between art and propaganda. The movie shows what the filmmakers put up with in order to be able to work. For example, shooting with real ammunition because blanks were not available.
مثلا وقتی فایل میکردیم اینا اما میشه تکنیک‌ها رو خود آماده می‌سازیم حادثه رخ نداد اما در فیلمسازی افغانستان چنین حادثه رخ داده یعنی قسمت نفر جای بود.
Director Shahbanu Sadat fled to Hamburg after the Taliban took over. Her first feature film premiered in Cannes in 2016, and in her second work, which won multiple awards, she managed to show Afghanistan in a different light. A 15-year-old dreams of a career as a Bollywood star on the streets of 1980s Kabul. The filmmakers of Afghanistan, and even more so the female directors, are used to struggling in order to make their films. They process their hardships through their work.
When we succeed to get out from airport, I decided to write about it. Then I shared it with the producer and I told her that I want to make film about those hours. It is about our struggles to get to evacuation flight. The Taliban limited filmmakers or artists. It doesn't mean that we are going to stop. We will continue and we will tell our stories from different perspectives.
Afghan's leading filmmakers are deeply rooted in the country's film history. With global recognition and networks, they continue to shape and develop it. And many of them are not willing to give up. Afghan cinema will live on, and Afghan filmmakers have shown that they won't be stopped, even by the Taliban.
Were you moved by our story about Afghan filmmakers? Tell us what you think in the comments and hit the subscribe button to dig deeper with us.